attachment produces pain and suffering. Even though there's a little bit of pleasure in there, it's also very painful. The more attached we are, the more suffering. We are attached to everything. We are very attached to our sense of self, our bodies, our life, our personal story, everything. By releasing this attachment and questioning, this is not going to bring me lasting happiness, so why am I putting all my energy into this or into maintaining this object or situation or this house or this job if eventually everything will change? We are sometimes so afraid of what the future will bring us that we want things to remain in the same way without modifying them, without changing anything. Or we want more of the same. But if we really learn to live without attachment and allowing things to come and go, then with that attitude, we are also creating the causes for experiencing greater happiness, and that whatever manifests in our life will be experienced from a point and an attitude of equanimity and freedom, because we're cultivating the habit of not relating with attachment to things, people, situations. So if they come and you can enjoy them, that's good. If they go and they're not there, that's good too. But if we grasp too much and we want things to be different from how they are in the present, then we suffer. The more we want things to be different, the more we suffer. All these questionings are very helpful for every time we feel a strong attachment to start analyzing. These analytical meditations are part of the Vipassana practices, and they help us develop greater wisdom and understanding.
Things can appear as being very pleasurable.
What is our projection and how we are perceiving them, what makes them so desirable or appearing in that way. But if we change our mind, our way of perceiving, of understanding reality, then we won't relate in the same way with things with attachment or aversion. This is a very helpful meditation for that reason. Shamatha meditation is also working in this regard to help us release attachment, because normally when we get distracted with thoughts about the past, the future, whatever thoughts, usually is attachment to those ideas, to those plans, to those things we want. Those thoughts are very related with our attachment. So if we learn to let go of those thoughts, we don't grasp to them and go with them, creating stories, and we bring our attention back to the breath, then we will be able to dwell more and more in the present with equanimity and release those strong attachments to our thoughts and our fantasies that separate us from the present. We are reflecting on impermanence. Is this really going to last and bring me happiness? What are the chances I will be separated from this? All these things go to releasing attachment by knowing its impermanence, by imagining possible outcomes, and by seeing that it's empty of inherent existence, whatever object of attachment. The more you reflect on it, the less you will have to formulate a specific question, but you will more intuitively see it, and you will become more aware and mindful moment by moment when you're acting out of attachment to an outcome or to a desire or something. You will feel it in your body, start to know that feeling of attachment when you're out of balance, when you're fearing that things will change. And you will come naturally, knowing that it's impermanent. And even though you might still feel it, you will have more tools and more understanding of how it exists. You will say, yeah, well, this appears like a source of pleasure or benefit, or this thing will bring a lot of benefit to my life, so I want it because it appears like that. But deep down, you know, it's appearing upon causes and conditions in that way, related to your own karma, to your perception, to your cognitive filters. You won't relate in the same way as if you didn't know all these things that you've been reflecting on. You can have a set of questions already written for your meditation and go one by one as a guideline, or you can do a guided meditation like this one. But you can also just contemplate the situation or the object in your mind and become aware of what is happening and the possible outcomes. Whatever you do will have a benefit. You will find the best way to meditate on this. This is just one approach. There's another one. For example, if it's an event in which you got attached, you want to remember it, you would do it in third person, like watching a movie, and you're going to recount all the facts. You will see yourself as acting in that movie. When you find the episode that detonated that strong attachment, you could pause it, the movie in your mind, freeze it, and then spend some time just taking the energy that you have stored in that episode that can be far away in the past, something that happened a long time ago, but you're still grasping to it. And every time you remember it, it brings a lot of emotions. So you know you're attached to that situation still, even if it passed a long time ago. You can breathe and bring back the energy you left in that place or person or situation. And then the moment you take the out breath, you release. Also, you give back whatever you took from that and you forgive. By doing this, you are releasing the grasping, the attachment to that episode. And the more you do it, the more you will eventually let it go completely. There are different methods to work with attachment. These analytical meditations of the lamb rim are one of them. They're very helpful because sometimes it's difficult when you're in the grip of the situation to observe directly how it exists. And by doing this questioning, you can go part by part reflecting on these things. There's 3 kinds of suffering that are described in the Buddhist tradition. The suffering, you hurt your hand and then it's very evident, the pain is there. That's one kind of suffering. But then there is the suffering of change, and that suffering is more associated with attachment, and is more subtle, because sometimes if you perceive things as being okay, you don't want the change. And even if you want the change, it can be painful because of the attachment. Maybe you want to move to another city and you are certain you want to do this, but the whole process can be painful and detonate a lot of suffering because you're attached to that house. You have to get rid of many things or possessions. Every change implies a challenge, and so the more detached you are to any outcome or circumstances or objects, the easier for you to process change. If you're super attached to a job and then suddenly you're fired, that change, that's the suffering of change, because some part of you expected it to last forever. But if you know it can happen, then you suffer less and less. Cultivating an attitude of detachment and equanimity doesn't mean to be without feelings or not caring. It means being engaged with reality and with things and people, but seeing everything from another perspective, knowing that it will change, so you don't get too attached. And that's okay. But the important thing is that you know it's not healthy to live with attachment, and it doesn't bring benefit for you or those around you. The more you let go and you can remain in a state of equanimity, the more peace and freedom you will find. And that's something to learn for yourself and to help others too. Don't feel bad if you don't feel attachment. Sometimes it appears like people expect from us that we show some strong attachment to something. The more you meditate on how ignorance, attachment, and aversion are the root causes of suffering, the more you will want to cultivate detachment. And so practicing generosity, we give the object of our attachment to somebody else, because that's very difficult if you're attached to something to give it. So we imagine in our minds giving it or offering it. And if you already lost it, you can do this meditation. If somebody else got the job or the person or the house or whatever thing you're attached to, you can say, okay, I give it to you. That trains your mind to cultivate the opposite habit of grasping and attachment, the generosity and letting go and detachment, but not confusing with indifference and with I don't care about anything or anybody. It's not closing your heart. It's still loving and engaging with people and situations the best you can without being attached to a certain result, without living without expectations, just living moment by moment, accepting whatever comes, knowing that even if what comes at the moment doesn't feel so good or is experienced as some kind of suffering, you can also be aware that that also is impermanent and it will pass. Because sometimes we get attached to our sufferings or to a story of being a victim or having a lot of obstacles, and that's also something to let go of and enjoy whatever you have in the moment and be free.
I often, when I'm meditating on something like that, I think I've picked a bad example. So I'm thinking, think of an object that you're attached to, and so I think of something, and then what happens if you lose it? And I think, well, if I lost it, I'd replace it. In which case, I haven't really lost it. I've lost that particular one, but I have the ability to replace. And I think, well, that wasn't a very good example then. I mean, if it was something like a job or a relationship, then obviously that's not so easy to do.
You can work with things that are not so strong attachments, and also you're creating an imprint by reflecting on this, because you might think, okay, well, I just replace it, but you don't know. You might lose or something happens to that thing, and you might feel a bit of discomfort or unhappiness because maybe you have to spend money to replace it, or maybe you have to go to the store to get it. There will be some kind of disagreeable experience that will be in proportion to your attachment. So if you're not so attached to it and it's something that you don't care, you can replace very easily, maybe you're not really attached to that object and you chose it for a reason. Maybe there's some attachment there that you have to work with. This exercise will help you for whenever you see, I do have a strong attachment to this other thing. And then you can repeat the process. When you realize we are attached to so many things that we don't even know, like our personal image or a circumstance. Sometimes we feel everything is perfect in my life. I'm not attached to anything. Everything is okay. But then there's a change that shows us that we are actually attached to something we didn't know we were attached to. I think it's good that you chose that example, because for a reason it comes to your mind in the moment. It's also allowing your inner wisdom to bring whatever comes up to mind. Sometimes you think you have to work with something very strong and dramatic, but you can do it with whatever comes to mind. Maybe you reflect on it and you realize, I'm not really attached to this. I don't care if I lose it. That's great. And then you can rejoice and congratulate yourself and make that imprint in your mind. We can do it with anything of our possessions, of our relationship, our personal story, our ideas about ourselves or our job. We can apply this to everything. And the more we reflect on this, the more we see that everything is like a dream. It's all appearances arising and passing. Well, thank you. Thank you for joining this.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much.